1916 was not just another year of war. It was the year death became mechanical, the year trenches became graves, the year Europe lost its soul. Two names would define it: Verdun and the Somme. Both would become symbols of destruction on a scale the world had never seen. The Battle of Verdun began on February 21, 1916. Germany's plan was simple: bleed France white. They would attack a symbolic fortress and force the French to defend it at all costs. Verdun was sacred ground to France, and the Germans knew it. Over the next 10 months, 40 million shells would fall on this stretch of earth. Forests were erased, villages disappeared, trenches became tombs. Both sides hurled men and metal into the fire. Verdun became a furnace that consumed everything. The French soldiers called themselves poilus, the hairy ones. At Verdun, they fought like shadows in a nightmare. General Pétain rotated troops constantly to keep morale up, but it barely helped. The air reeked of gas, rot, and cordite. There was no clean water, no escape, no silence. By December 1916, nearly 700,000 men had been killed, wounded, or lost at Verdun, for a battle that changed nothing. To relieve pressure on Verdun, the British and French planned a major offensive in the Somme Valley. Originally a French-led attack, it became primarily a British operation after Verdun dragged on. July 1, 1916 was set as the launch date. It would become the bloodiest day in British military history. At 7:30 a.m., 120,000 British soldiers rose from their trenches and advanced across open ground. They had been told the German defenses were destroyed by artillery. They weren't. German machine guns cut them down like wheat. Entire battalions vanished in minutes. Communications broke down. Chaos reigned. By nightfall, nearly 60,000 British soldiers were casualties. 20,000 of them were dead, all for a few hundred yards of ground. The Somme would continue for another 5 months, becoming a grinding war of shells, mud, and slaughter. 1916 also saw the debut of a new weapon, the tank. On September 15th, the British used tanks for the first time at the Battle of Flers-Courcelette. They were slow, unreliable, and often broke down, but they terrified the Germans and marked the beginning of mechanized warfare. Meanwhile, the skies became a battleground. Fighter aces like Germany's Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, and others turned war into theater. But for most pilots, death came quickly, often within weeks of their first mission. While the West bled in the trenches, Russia struck back in the East. In June 1916, General Alexei Brusilov launched a surprise assault on Austro-Hungarian lines. Using innovative tactics, like brief targeted bombardments and infiltration units, the Russians shattered Austrian defenses. It was Russia's most successful offensive of the war, but the cost was staggering. Over 1 million casualties on both sides, and Russia's ability to sustain such operations was collapsing. By late 1916, the war was grinding down the nations that waged it. Civilian morale was crumbling. Food shortages plagued Germany and Austria. In Russia, revolution loomed. Britain introduced conscription. France replaced its commander-in-chief. Germany replaced Falkenhayn after Verdun's failure. The old strategies were failing, but no one had new answers. In Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, colonial subjects continued to fight for empires that denied them freedom. In the U.S., the pressure was mounting. Unrestricted submarine warfare, British propaganda, and events like the Black Tom explosion stirred public anger. But still, America stayed out, for now. By the end of 1916, over 2.3 million soldiers had become casualties at the Somme and Verdun alone, and the war was nowhere near over. New weapons, new tactics, new leaders, and still no victory. Only more death. 1916 was not a turning point. It was a warning. The old world was breaking, and something darker was rising in its place. In episode 6, we dive into 1917, a year of collapse. The Russian Empire will fall. The United States will enter, and the war will move closer to its end, but not yet to peace.